Okay. The next question then, how do you address conflicts or differing opinions between clients, architects, and subcontractors? Sometimes people don't agree.
Oh, yes. Um, Again, I think the key is just communication and expectation.
Hmm.
Conflicts often arise when there's some lack of communication and an unmet expectation. And so I think just being so clear that not only are you understood, but that you're not misunderstood is really important. That's a really hard thing to do, but I think having consistent meetings and not letting a lot of time go by you'll be able to solve smaller problems so that you don't have bigger conflicts that build up. If we can address small issues as we go, you're not going to end up having really big conflicts. And when the big conflicts do come, it's just about, at least from my perspective, we like to say that we put the client in the driver's seat.
Hmm.
So we want the client to feel like they're the ones making the decision. I'm just the guide. I'm the person there in the passenger seat telling them, hey, you're going to want to make a right up here.
Right.
And if you don't make the right up here, you're going to want to take the next right or the next left or whatever. I'm there to just be a supportive role and be the professional that knows my trade and can make the recommendations that the client needs and give the client as much information as they need to make a decision. And that actually simplifies the process. And I don't find conflicts coming as much when we are operating that way.
Great.
When we aren't true to that as a business, and we still have conflicts. We are not perfect, but when those conflicts come, when I do an evaluation of the conflict, I'm speaking to the client, I'm speaking to the project manager and those on site. What I often discover is the reason the conflict has come is because we lost sight of the relationship and how it functions.
Yeah.
And that's we stopped communicating as clearly. We viewed ourselves as the person driving the bus instead of the guide.
Okay. What is your experience with sustainable building practices, and how do you incorporate those ideas into custom home designs?
Yeah, sustainability is actually a funny word. Um,
Hmm.
uh, there's I think it's been hijacked a little bit, the meaning of sustainability.
Okay.
Sustainability to me at least, in how we treat it, does not mean green or eco,
Agreed. Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Um, Eco-friendly or green is not sustainability. And the sustainability of a home means how long is it going to last? And is it going to maintain its integrity for long periods of time
Hmm.
without being compromised, right? So to me, when you look at some of the castles that are in Europe, you may have an argument that they are hyper sustainable because they've been there for thousands and thousands of years, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Brick is one material which is considered to be very high in embodied carbon, not really a sustainable material. Um, but if you look at buildings built with Roman brick 2000 years ago, I would argue that's a highly sustainable building
that's right.
because of its longevity.
Yes, exactly. And so when you consider sustainability from that perspective,
Hmm.
all of a sudden things start to change and you start asking different questions, right? And if we're just focusing on environmentalism, that's going to give you one set of products that you can put in a home that are environmentally sustainable. Um, when you are looking at just the other side of it, of just lasting as long as it can, that's going to provide a certain other set of products. So you really
Hmm.
have to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Uh, when someone says sustainable to me, I'm going to ask, well, what do you mean by that? And then their answer will determine what the path that we take. If they want
Yeah.
sustainability in terms of eco-friendly, we can provide certain measures. To me, when we take sustainable building practices into account, we're using high grade materials. We're making sure that we prioritize things like um, uh, longevity and durability, but also uh, especially in homes, we want it to be comfortable. If someone feels like they have to rip down their home or may do a major renovation because their room is really cold, then we didn't use the right product, right? To
Hmm.
me, bat insulation is not sustainable. And why is bat insulation not sustainable? Is because it does an okay job in certain um, specific roles and instances
Hmm.
at maintaining um, a good R value. A much more sustainable insulation product is maybe a blown-in insulation, or maybe it's a combination of a foam and a spray foam and a blow-in product, or there's some sort of combination of those two, or maybe it's your siding. I know our technology nowadays is we have insulated, weatherproof um, uh, plywood that we stick on the outside of a building. Um, all of those things can be taken into account to make sure that not only is your home going to last a long time, at
Hmm.
least as long as you're alive, but hopefully for a long, long, long time.
Right.
And it's going to require little to no maintenance over that time period. And you're going to be comfortable in your home for the entire time period. So it's a mix of all of those things. That you have to take into account. To me, I don't think that 30-year rated shingles are sustainable.
I
Uh,
agree. Yeah.
you
I
have
was
to
just thinking about
replace
that.
every
It's
30.
it's the cheapest thing to install the first time, but if you have to install it three times the amount of time that you could have had the metal roof on there, it's no longer cheaper.
No longer cheaper. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if you consider, hey, we're going to own this home, or I want this, I'm building this, especially in these highly custom projects that they're building a legacy home.
Uh-huh.
It's like when I see someone building a legacy home and then they're putting on a shingled roof, I'm thinking to myself, this isn't a legacy home then,
Yeah.
right? Or at least you just don't have the budget to put the roof on. Like, let's plan for that, right? But if you're putting on a temporary roof that you know in the next 15 years or 10 years you're going to put on a metal roof, then we have to plan for that in architecture. We have to plan
Hmm.
for that in engineering and make sure that the structure is going to support the metal roof in the years to come.
Yeah. All the things that you're talking about here really have to do with the envelope of the building or the outside skin of the building. And so when I talk to my clients, I encourage them to spend more money there
Yeah,
than you would see in a conventionally constructed home because you really only have one chance to do that right.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
If you want to do the higher R value with much tighter ceiling details so that your air changes per hour in the house is very low, which is going to give you a huge degree of control over your comfort and in the interior environment and keep damp out and create wall systems that dry themselves very well so you never have problems with mold and have that roof that's very long lasting. You only have one chance to do that right.
Yeah.
The
It
countertops
really
you put
is.
in, you can change that every 5 years if you really want to. Like it's not that big of a deal. It's fairly expensive, but not invasive. It's
Yeah.
right there on the surface. And I think that there is a large focus on the things that you can see.
Yeah.
So I like to reframe that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. Especially with like when you consider windows as well.
Yeah.
Windows is usually one of the very first when we're meeting with a client and they say, "Oh, I want this window system. We want the best windows possible." And then they
Mm.
see the line item for the window budget and they're like, "Can we do that for cheaper?" And it's like, "Yes." And windows usually are one of the very first line items to get cut and save money on.
Yeah.
And I like to tell my clients, listen, the windows are probably the last thing you want to save money on, because it's the place you have the highest likelihood to have uh, to have heat exchange, and you
Yes.
just don't want to have the heat exchange in your window. So the reason that your room is
Because even
cold,
even really good windows are like an R5 or something, where
right?
the wall next to it might be an R30 or something.
Yes, yeah,
So those windows are a huge deal.
huge deal. And so usually when you have cold spots or cold rooms in your house, it's less likely that it's because of the insulation. It's more likely because you have cheap windows.
Yeah. Another thing that I'll say about Windows, it's very common to have vinyl windows as sort of the base level product, very inexpensive. I was doing some research and writing about the LA fires that occurred here recently. Um, Vinyl windows melt in a fire.
Yes.
So if someone's looking at building a home in a fire-prone area, you know, uh, you don't want to have a window that could potentially be melting, because if the frame melts, the glass falls out, then the fire just gets into the home.
Yes.
And maybe that was the point where some of those homes were lost, where if they had, a fiberglass or a steel framed window that's not going to melt, then maybe the fire would not have got in at all. So, that's just another thing to think about when looking
Yeah.
at the design of the home.
That goes to saying, like, same with like your siding. You might
Hmm.
have vinyl siding. Well, that's
Oof.
just going to melt, right?
Yeah,
And then you're going to get your vinyl is melted. Then your house catches on fire, and then your windows melt, and then you're just in a big mess. Whereas if you use like a Durarock product or a Hardy product,
yeah,
uh, Hardy products are Class A fire rated, right?
yeah.
So the likelihood of your entire house burning down really fast when you have a metal window and a Hardy product on the outside is actually really low. And unless, of course, the fire starts from inside.
Well,
But
that's a different problem. Yeah.
that's right.
And that's why we have sprinklers in larger homes.
Yes.
Okay, the next question, let's get a little bit political. The current administration is aggressively pushing forward with the deportation of up to 20 million undocumented workers living in the United States. Given that the country has had a labor shortage in construction that has just been continually getting worse for decades, how do you expect this is going to impact building projects over the next few years?
I'm actually very optimistic. For us, we have a rule of making sure that we do not hire um, businesses, subcontractors that cannot produce the appropriate documents, insurance and otherwise, licenses, etc.
Okay.
And so that actually yields itself to a better product, um, a product that you're going to be happier with long term. And so I don't see it initially affecting businesses like mine. And I know I'm not the only business that has
And, and
those.
and you're speaking as far as just your ability to deliver projects.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, Now, in terms of the longevity of how long will it take for it to impact us, because then other people that may be using uh, people or businesses that are heavily using illegal labor, um, they're going to start using the businesses that don't, right? So now you're
So
going to
you have increased competition in the market and fewer players.
So for my business, I think we're in a good position because we're already there. And so
Uh-huh.
we already have established relationships. So the companies that are going to be able to deliver high quality products that currently are using those companies will continue to be successful because they already have established relationships. So I don't know that it'll affect me all that much initially. Where I think
Hmm.
the long-term play is, I actually believe that what the current administration is doing is right. Um, I think as they are deported, we need to. I also believe in immigration. My great grandmother was an immigrant. She came through Ellis Island. I believe very, very firmly that immigration is important. In
Hmm.
fact, our current president's wife is an immigrant, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think there's this idea that we're just deporting them forever. But as I've talked with people that are a part of the administration, I'm on the Home Builders Association Government Affairs Committee. I'm involved in local administrations and local community. And I interact with state and local and federal government a decent amount. And it sounds like the idea is to deport, and it's sort of a scare tactic so that there will be a lot of self-deporting. And
Hmm.
then they want to open the front door and close off the back door, if you will, so
Okay.
that we can bring in a lot of these immigrants back into the country in a legal, safe way, rather than in them staying here in an illegal way.
Hmm.
And that to me, as I've been paying attention to this, because it is really important and does directly affect our industry. I've seen I've seen some job sites where there should be people working, but there is none. It seems like it's a ghost town, and I've seen this both on the internet and here locally, although I have seen it a lot less locally here. Um, it's been interesting to pay attention to this, and my personal belief is that we will see a flood of legal immigration happening over the next few years as well, because we'll be inviting the people that want to come here legally and work. And I think it's our duty as Americans to make it easy for people to come um, in the right ways
Hmm.
legally. And we also are a land of laws, and we have to obey the land of laws. And I get that. And my hope is that if there is if there is any effect on our business, um, it will be negligible. But this is also you were mentioning that, like, we have this exacerbated labor shortage. This is not something that is just purely because of illegal immigration.
No,
Uh,
not at all.
we are seeing less and less people of all ages coming into the trades. So
Hmm.
it doesn't really matter how many illegal immigrants we have coming into this country or that are working in the trades. If we don't have highly skilled, qualified builders and architects and engineers to build those buildings, the majority of them are just of illegal labor, from what I've noticed, is not in the general contractor realm, which is where I think the main pinch is coming, is there's just simply not enough general contractors to perform the work. And so what you'll see is you'll actually see an increase in a lot of in projects that are done well, because you won't have these fly-by-night institutions or companies or people that are finishing basements or doing remodels on people's houses that have no business doing it. And so I think you'll see quality increase. You may see a pinch on the time it takes to get a project done. You might see it
Hmm.
increase. But my hope is that in the long run, it will be way more beneficial, not just to those that are coming here legally and now have the right to get training and have their own contractor's license and business
Yeah.
and have all the rights that American citizens should have. But also you'll see the quality of builds increase as well.
Okay. This is a much more positive take on the situation than I'm seeing from other outlets. But if I may offer just a little counterpoint, my concern is that as so many laborers are deported, just given the shortage of those people kind of in a short period of time, I do have this concern that we're going to see some pretty large price increases as competition amongst the remaining competitors becomes higher and higher, just so you can attract them to your job at all.
Yeah,
But
I
I
think
am
it's a
I'm
wrong
hopeful by what
perspective.
you're saying here. If we do see the current administration sort of open the doors and expand access to legal immigration, perhaps we can get many of these workers back and not see these price increases that I'm afraid that we will.
Yeah. And you're not wrong either. So that's a valid perspective, and I'm hopeful as well that we won't see drastic price increases, but I can almost guarantee that we will see some price increase.
Yeah.
How drastic it will be, that is, I think, yet to be determined.
Yeah. And something that most people are unaware of is that the price increases in the construction market is has far outpaced general market inflation year over year, decade after decade. Often it's about 9%. That's very common for construction. Um, and so that's just another pressure that's making things more difficult for people. So we might even see those price increases be in excess of double digits, but hopefully not. Hopefully
Yeah,
not.
hopefully not. But I think you're going to see price increases no matter what, just
Yes.
because of the
Yeah,
lack.
that's kind of the point I was getting to, is we see price increases anyway because
Yes.
of other issues.
Yeah. Yeah, we need more people. We need more young people coming into the trades is what we need.
That we do. That we do. Okay, let's get on to our next question then. Just a couple more here. What advice would you give someone just starting their custom home journey regarding contractor selection? What should they really be looking for?
I would ask your contractor what their detailed plan is. And if they don't have a detailed plan about how they're going to work with you,
Hmm.
um, that it doesn't mean that they're unqualified. It just means that you have more questions to ask.
Yeah.
And I would as the person that is trying to build a better Utah, not just in sustainable buildings, but also in how we conduct business as general contractors. The whole one of my main missions of construction management pros is to redefine what people expect from a general contractor. And
Hmm.
so this is really an important question. And instead of being worried about price, which is usually what a lot of people just default to, is just give me the lowest price. You should be asking yourself, well, why are they giving me the lowest price? Can they give me a detailed plan of how this is going to happen? And if they can't produce those things, if they can't to your satisfaction, give a great explanation or a detailed plan on how they're going to execute your project, they're probably not going to execute your project to your satisfaction, and
Yeah.
you will have a lot of problems. And so we what we offer is an opportunity to get to work together. We call it a design contract. We actually think that this should be standard in the industry where you get a free estimate, it's worth as much as you've paid for it. And so we encourage clients to not get a guesstimate, but actually let's figure out what it's actually going to cost so that way you can make an informed decision. And
Hmm.
so our design agreements up front, they only are for design. And it's just to have us work with an architect, a designer, and whether it's an interior, a designer that comes from us or a designer that you're working with or an architect that you're working with, or we can bring one to the table, it really doesn't matter to us. We want to get to the place where we can answer some questions so that we can give you a very accurate price on what it actually is going to cost and then allow you to make the best, most informed decision. And our contract doesn't go beyond the design contract. And so we present all the information to you. Now you own it. And so you can go get other bids. You can compare and contrast. And I would encourage everyone to do that.
Yep.
And that gives you an opportunity to actually work with a contractor and see if you mesh, see if you like each other, see if your personalities work well together. And if they can't deliver on a design contract very well, they're definitely not going to deliver on a custom home very well.
Yeah.
And that will give you an opportunity to enter in at a low cost and say low risk, low cost. Are we compatible to work together? Instead of signing the dotted line for the $3 million custom home, and now you're, a quarter of the way through and you're regretting your decision, but you've signed on the line and now you're kind of screwed. And so you've just bite the bullet and you continue on your way.
Right.
If you can sign a design contract for a few $1,000s, they get you a chance to work together, and then you can say, do I want to continue with this person or do
Hmm.
I want to find someone else? That will save you a lot of grief in the long run.
Yeah. So this is kind of an alternative contract structure. Sort of the standard way of doing things is you work with an architect, you design the building, then you go into bidding, where you get a bunch of contractors to bid the project, and then you select a contractor and you move forward into construction. But what you're talking about is bringing the contractor in on day one,
Yes.
and they're going to comment on the design in terms of cost efficiency and buildability and various things like that.
You got it. Yep. Then
Yeah.
you've hired a team of people that are working for your best interest, and that includes an interior designer, that includes an architect, that includes the general contractor that are working together for your best interest to deliver what you actually want, rather than
Hmm.
bringing the contractor after the fact and he's like, well, what about this? And what about this? And then you're kind of back to the drawing board and that just delays the time. We just say,
Sure.
hey, let's
Yeah.
just cut to the chase and do this right from the beginning.
Yeah,
And
it can be a really good method of doing things. One of the things that I talk with about all of my clients is the cost to complete changes on a timeline from the beginning of design all the way through the end of construction. And at the beginning of design, the cost of making a change is extremely small, very, very small. If we're just in programming where we have a list of rooms and what those rooms look like, and we're adding and subtracting rooms, those changes cost virtually nothing.
Yeah.
But if we get to the point where we're about to start construction and the architect and all the engineers have fully detailed drawings and all their calculations are done, all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, and you say, hey, we want to move that wall 6 inches, that seems like a very small change,
Yeah.
but it might lead to a lot of work because
Yes.
we want all those drawings to be well coordinated. So when you get into construction, you don't run into issues. And so that's a much more expensive change. Then you go into construction and you might reach a point where that wall is already built. And now
Yes.
you're saying, let's move it 6 inches. It's even more expensive.
Yeah.
So bringing the contractor in up front gives you an opportunity to find some of those things and hopefully make the changes earlier and save yourself some money.
Yeah. And the expense of it all isn't just in material.
Yeah.
It's or even time for the engineer or the architect or the contractor to work together. It also costs a lot of time in stoppage. And that is one of the things
Hmm.
that I think is hard for clients to understand is the cost of stoppage time.
Yep.
Because if you're running on a schedule, that subcontractor, your electrician, your plumber, your framer, your whoever, if he has to go on stoppage time, he has a decision to make. Do I just send all of my guys home or and then charge more? Or do I find another project that I can put them on that maybe fill in a gap, but I
Yep.
don't know how long a stoppage time we're going to do. So I'm just going to take whatever job we can. And then you might be ready, but the framer's not ready to come back. And now you're at additional stoppage time. And then by the
Hmm.
time he gets back, he might have questions. He has to get reevaluated on the project. He's got to get his head back into on this project, reevaluate
Exactly.
plans. And there's
Mo
so much that goes into stoppage time that most people just don't think about.
yeah. Momentum is huge.
It is
Sometimes a 1 or a 2 day stop can lead to an entire month of delays for that very reason.
it's true. Yep.
Okay. So then finally, anything else that you want to add about the importance of working with a contractor in home design?
No, I think it's just making sure, just like what I mentioned before, I just want to reiterate that we have to change the way we think about contractors.
Hmm.
And if you want to, as a homeowner, if you want a better experience with a contractor, you have to be willing to pay for a better experience with a contractor. And not that that experience is going to cost exponentially more. I don't think it does. Actually, we are very competitive in the market. I
Yeah.
think it's just reframing our minds on how the process goes. And just because something is different or new doesn't mean it's wrong. And so because we've encountered in our work that there are times where we encounter people that are like, well, none of my other contractors wanted that or asked those questions. Why is that important for you?
Hmm.
Just because it's different doesn't mean it's doing. We try to do a very good job of explaining and helping clients understand our process, but being open to, it's the definition of insanity. You do the same thing over and over again. You're going and expect a different result. That's insanity. So
Yeah.
oftentimes we have to say, okay, well, maybe it's okay to be slightly different, and how can we reframe our mind to expect different from a contractor? And that's okay. That's good. And we want to disrupt the industry, if you will, to raise the bar for how contractors and construction is interacting with the public.
Hmm. Okay. Perfect. David, that's our time. Thank you for joining the conversation around the drafting table today to provide your thoughts on general contracting. And until next time, to all of our listeners, get in touch with Oxford Architect so we can dream together.
Thanks, Kory. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.